Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the CFES Brilliant Pathways webinar series. Today's title, The Value of Recruiting Experiencing Diversity on and Off the Field. We have a number of subjects within that we're going to address with today's guest, who I'm very excited to introduce, Jesse Cormier, head coach of Florida Gulf Coast University men's soccer team, former head coach at his alma mater, University of Vermont, where he led the Catamounts to a pair of second-round NCAA tournament bids and top 20 ranking, I think 14th, as high as they got. So he's had a lot of success, currently having success where he's at on the field, but I've been very impressed with what he's done off the field in terms of his ability to kind of inspire students to get to college from a variety of diverse backgrounds, and then to kind of help them get through, because as you know, close to a 40% dropout rate right now across the country. It's a big issue. Jesse's addressed it for 2 decades really. So I think a good place to start. I'll let Jesse say a few things about himself, and maybe some advice he might have for people who are on the webinar today, especially students who are considering going to college. I mean, I think they're quote unquote college material when they really are, and there's a lot of different pathways that Jesse can also talk about for how you can get there. So I'll let you take it away, Jesse.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I've learned a lot about this organization. It's a phenomenal setup and mission you guys are on. So when we connected on it, there was no question I was going to get involved because, starting in the, late 80s, being in high school and then going through a process from a small town in upstate New York, Hoosick Falls, where I believe we had about 100 per class in high school. I didn't understand sort of the next level in higher education, and my parents did a pretty good job of trying to push us that direction as kids. But in our hometown, it was probably more normal for us to stay and figure out sort of a path from there within our local community. So I was luckily enough able to impress Ron McKeechin. John, I'm not sure if you remember Ron, but he was our head coach at the University of Vermont, and he took a shot at me and gave me an opportunity to get out of Hoosick Falls and go on to experience a pretty incredible 4 years at the University of Vermont. After that, the knock on me was, you're from this small town, there's no way you're going to be able to get out. And I was able to kind of defy the odds there. And then when I got to UVM, going through my experience and having the opportunity through UVM's mission to grow and mature, and also mature as a student and as an athlete, I was able to go to England to play for a couple seasons. After that, I was able to do some coaching in England, and fell in love with coaching more than I did as an athlete. And so coming back after spending time with some of the youth in England, I was really interested in getting involved to mentor some young people in this country and some young student athletes. So I went on to coach at the Bradley University as a graduate assistant, where I did a master's degree in leadership. And then I went to West Virginia University as an assistant, Oregon State as an assistant, and then I went on to the University of Vermont and was there for 13 years as a head coach. Most recently, I moved down to Florida, so I can tell you there's a big difference in climate between Vermont and Florida. And I'm now working here at Florida Gulf Coast University as the head coach of the men's soccer program. And, my goal initially, as a head coach, was to really develop young men to become champions and hang banners and have a lot of success and feel really good about their student athlete experience, and build great teams. And that was sort of my early part of my journey and my mission as a coach. But it's kind of changed, as I've gone through this experience. I certainly, that should be a byproduct of the environment that we create. But I want my mission to grow in terms of empowering young people from all walks of life, from even the young high school age all the way up through the college ranks, postgraduate. I guess as you get older, you start to realize that there's a much bigger picture as a coach, and there's a lot more dimensions and layers that go into this process. And I feel like it's time for me to, do the best that I can to develop my certain team and my athletes and my student athletes, but also reach out into communities and help facilitate a process and an educational process for, there may be kids, certainly in this conversation, or families that I may never come across, as a student athlete at FGCU, but maybe I can help educate and influence in other ways. So this conversation for me is really, John, I don't know if you've noticed through our dialogue, but I hope you can feel my excitement, because I think this is a great thing, and I'm really excited to engage with your group and this organization.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I think it's really interesting that when you talk about recruiting kind of a diverse team,
Yep.
and how each kid, depending on where they're from, struggles with wanting to stay in college. In fact, you told me the other day, you feel like it's almost the norm for most kids to say, I think I might want to go home, and your own experience from Hoosick Falls, you
Yep.
thought, you know what, I was comfortable there. You talk about a player you had from one of the best players in Canada, and he was very comfortable at home, and he's like, I've got demands on me now. I've got, and this could be for any student, but an athlete, he's got tests coming up and all these things. And he's like, I feel like I just want to go home. How do you, and what advice would you give to students here? It falls in with perseverance, which is an essential skill of CFES, along with networking, leadership, and agility, and some others. What's your advice there? And what if they don't, your father was important in that role to you? Let's just say that, and you have players that their fathers or parents, aren't that involved. Who might they turn to, or how can they kind of persevere through?
Well, the big thing is that feeling of wanting normalcy and wanting, I don't want to call it the easy way, but when you're comfortable where you are, for many people, it is a situation where they're not expending a ton of energy. They're not required to grow. They're not required to really rise to the challenge. And I think what I figured out, in my 25 years at different universities, the universities that do it the best are on a mission. And part of that mission is for young people to go through an evolution. And the evolution means change. And while you're changing and adapting to the demands, like you said, of the academic rigors, for us, it's the student athlete. So the athletic challenges, like our guys will be up early in the morning, training, lifting, running, and then have academic requirements throughout the day. And as you go through that, and you're coming from an environment where you had a pretty consistent routine, the demands are basically put on you by, in some ways, sometimes the high school teachers, and sometimes it's your parents, sort of laying out a bunch of chores. And that's supposed to sort of prepare you for the next step, which is the mission of the university. If the university does a really good job, you're not going to find comfort often. You're always going to be challenged, your mind, your intellect, your ability to solve problems, having to build relationships within your class, and with your professors and your faculty. If you're an athlete, having relationships with your coaches who are there to mentor you and challenge you. And I had a conversation in our team huddle yesterday, and I said, I am not here to sort of cater to your whims. I am here to point out things that you can do better, because I see things in you and the potential in you that you may not even see. And my job, and I think the faculty would probably speak in a similar manner if it involves the academic realm, but our job is to really stretch human beings. And in that process of being stretched, it's challenging. I mean, I had times when I'm sure every single one of my guys has had a reckoning saying, do I really want to do this? Why am I up so early? This is so hard. In my own world, I had my own. I remember my sophomore year after the season was over. I loved soccer. I loved my history major, my program. And I just said, how much more of this can I take? And I remember my father saying, when we agreed to do this, you knew you were going to bump up against some really challenging, difficult things. Whether it's your body hurting, whether it's fatigue, whether it's, lack of sleep. And ultimately, we knew that through this process, after the 4 years, you were going to be much more prepared in your life to go after what you wanted to go after and build your future. And that's what we agreed on. So guess what, man? There's no checking out on it. Not because it's getting hard. And I think, I'm sure in our team huddle, there's not one guy in that huddle that hasn't had that reckoning in that moment. But I'll tell you that, if I had given up at that point, I wouldn't be where I am today, for sure. I would have taken a different path, would never had the opportunity to travel around the world, go to England. And I can tell you that the guys who have sort of stuck it out and been persistent and persevered through the experience can probably say the same thing. I have guys who have signed pro deals, and I'm sure in their sophomore, freshman, junior year, have said, I don't know if this is for me, and probably had conversations with their parents. And I have guys that have graduated who are now doctors, who have gone through law school, who've got master's degrees, that had that same thought process. And our job, and we're put in place as coaches and as faculty, is to identify that's going to happen and help navigate the process to get through it. And it's a powerful thing, man. I'm not going to lie. It's an incredible journey, and it's a very powerful experience that we're all on together. So that would be sort of the, a bit of advice, but also, some of my own experience.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. If I were to play devil's advocate a little bit and say, I'm a student out there and I'm listening to this and I say, wow, that's powerful, but man, that sounds really like, do I want to do, like, what, do I want to go through that? Because it sounds like, it's not an easy thing, right? So the sell would be, if I do this, I'm going to get opportunities like you just said. You have players who have gone on to become doctors. I mean, it's really been a pathway to a different life, But if a young person says, what else is it? Like, what am I going to get in college? Because a lot of kids, there's a lot of focus today about just focus on getting a major that'll get you a job right away. Like, that's your focus. And the academics are all that matter. But you and I have talked about it's so much more than that. And even just you come from a rural area, you go to a school that's much more diverse. You've never been around people from other areas. What's the value in that, and how does it prepare them? I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question, but prepare them for sort of the real world when they get out of college.
It's a great question. The big thing for me, I say this, and I take it in a kind of very light tone around my wife, but I say that it's the best personal 4 years of my life, going to university, because although it was challenging, and I was stretched to grow as a human being, coming from a small town in upstate New York. The rewards and the experiences and the relationships that you develop in that environment are, to this day, my best friend was my roommate at University of Vermont. He's now working for Apple. He just had a big launch yesterday. And we talk basically every day. So although it is, I do express the challenge, it is the most rewarding and incredible personal experience I think that a young person can go through, because you feel that metamorphosis. You feel if you really invest in it, there's so much that can be taken out of it. and I do caution people because, you know, I think when you're making that choice to go down that path, you have to factor in, is this university or this opportunity, what kind of mission are they on? And John, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I've seen a lot of changes over the years, and universities have to be really vigilant that they stay on a mission and it doesn't become a business. Because to me, university is not a business. It's a mission for young people to go into and to go through that process of evolution and change and grow and become and kind of own their own and take responsibility and own their own world. Some universities have not only mastered it, you know, during our time and prior to us and in the past hundreds of years. But I think when your group and young people are looking at universities, what kind of mission are they on? Part of that mission, there's got to be a level of difference and diversity in that mission, in that environment. Because in this world, today's world, having an education that involves everybody, every walk of life, every socioeconomic background, every sort of person you can imagine, you want in that environment, because there's so much relationship building, interaction, leadership, you know, and I think the universities have that massive responsibility to create that reality, and many of them do it really well. And you do have access to every walk of life, and you do walk out of there with a degree, you know, and a really good degree in many cases. But beyond that, you walk out of there with a degree in life. And it's just such an incredible step towards, you know, the next phase of your life called the real world. And some of those universities are really, really incredible at sort of creating that environment.
Yeah, you wrote, it's a good segue. You wrote a really powerful, kind of an open letter to UVM that ran as an op-ed in some different publications that I thought was really heartfelt and probably hard to write, because you played at UVM, your heart and soul was there, you coached, and you weren't putting down UVM, you were just raising some really important questions about, are they one of these universities, like many others that you just talked about? Are they, do they value diversity, and what's kind of their plan when students get there, that they have that full experience? So so if a young person, like you're saying, is considering, like, okay, they finally believe their college material. They're like, all right, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
They look around at different schools, and you know how that, I mean, we've been having virtual tours with students right now. They all look great, right? It's a marketing video. It's like, oh, that school
Very
looks
nice.
amazing. You know, it's like, how do you know? So we try and watch it with them and say, you know, that's not actually how that works. It's, you know, we give them a reality tour, I guess I would say. But how would a student who values the things that you're talking about, is there any way they can get a feel for a place that, like, you know what, I think they do it right, and that is a place for me where I could learn about life?
Well, I think, and this is part of the recruiting process for me, you know, as we go through this process with many families and they're looking at UVM or FGCU, I think there is a certain amount of self-identification and self-awareness on what they really want. And when they go into an environment and the family goes in, and they usually take a trip, or they're looking for things online, or they meet faculty members, they talk to financial aid, there's a vibe. There's definitely a vibe. And you know, if you do your homework and you do some self-work, you know what you're after. When you get into that certain environment, like I can feel it with a recruit. And when he and his parents come and they sit down with me, I can feel the connection, and I can feel them gravitating into, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I've been envisioning for a while. This is my life, my vision of what I saw as the next step for myself. And I think that, like I said, I think that's a powerful thing. And I think those instincts are based on self-awareness. And it's based on sort of, this is how I thought it was going to be. And these are the people I want to surround myself with. So that decision for me should be based on, and I've also seen the other side where, you know, a kid will go to a school because it's, you know, the football teams in the top 20. You know, they love the look of the stadium on TV. You know, they sell out basketball games, and they make a decision based on some of those other factors that don't factor in their own self-awareness and, you know, the bells and the whistles. And I find that they get disappointed in the actual function. And so, you know, that's self-awareness for me, and connecting to the people you're going to interact with every day, faculty, staff, the student body. And again, it's such a critical time to build relationships, friendships. You want to choose a campus of people that you know can stretch you, they care about you, and they're invested in the mission that you're on to grow and become a better, you know, the best version of yourself. You know, you want to walk out of there and go, this is the best person I've ever become, right? These are I understand character, I understand my potential, and I'm working towards that. And I got people surrounded, you know, in my world that are helping me do that. And I think that's a great choice. I think you can't do better than that.
Yeah, if you kind of take that and then move it forward to sort of the current COVID world and the situation there. I mean, in that Washington Post article today that I sent you, you know, they were talking about 100,000 less students from impoverished areas have not filled out the FAFSA just from last year. Miami-Dade has a 20% decline in kids applying to college, 20% Black, 17% Hispanic, you know, less. So there's something going on now that's on top of what we're already talking about as a challenge for kids to find this place to find a place that works for them. But this giving up a little bit even before that is happening. I mean, do you have any feeling for that, or why it might be? And I don't know if in your recruiting travels, if you're feeling anything.
Well, why is it happening? I think there's a number of reasons. I think, you know, I always look at this process with sort of two real hurdles. One is the admissions hurdle. And in the admissions hurdle, you really do have to embrace and love academics. Now, I know in high school, there are many kids that are going, you know, I'm going to college, but I don't really particularly like this course or that course, or, you know, nothing really grabbed me. But at the end of the day, these opportunities are going to be there for the kids that, you know, do work as hard as they can and start to gravitate towards the development of their intellect, their academics, the challenges. For me, obviously, a big grab or a big hold for us is soccer, because kids are very passionate about it, and they, you know, and sometimes what I find with our guys in the recruiting process is that the soccer piece is the gateway, but the academics, as they go through the process here, you know, guys who were All-Americans and these phenomenal soccer players and had a good background academically, but didn't really have any passion, usually by the end of their course study, towards the end of their junior, senior year, are sending me grades of their certain classes that they love. Hey, coach, look at this. I got an A, or I got an A- or an A+, in whatever it is that they're passionate about. So that's one piece. I think the admissions process, people don't necessarily want to go through it. They don't want to put themselves out there. I don't know if COVID has also created an economic situation where, you know, kids are there's more demands to support the family and help their parents. I know there's been, you know, significant levels of unemployment. So that could be a component. And then on the other side, you know, after the admissions, I think the financial challenge is real. And, you know, I think universities, again, I put more on universities, you know, than more people or many people, I'm sure. But I think universities, they have a financial aid office for a reason. And so once students get through the process of admissions, and they've submitted everything, they've put themselves out there, they've gone through, they've written their letters, and they've really kind of, put their own personal vision out there into that specific school. And the school says, yes, you know what? You'd be great for us. You'd be great for our campus. You'd be great for our institution. We'd love to have you involved in this program or that program. You're exceptional in this way, and we want to build on that. Then it becomes, okay, how do we afford it? And, I think here, at FGCU, I don't want to single us out, but I think we have some people in that office who are truly phenomenal, because they're so creative, and they'll never rest until they've gone to the end of the earth for that family to figure out how this can work, not how it can't work. And that's been a really, really eye-opening experience for me, because we all know the cost. And, I have a son who just, is going into his junior year. And I got a daughter who's in her senior year in high school. So we're going to have two next year that are both very interested in, going through the 4-year experience. How do we afford it? Well, the financial aid office and the representatives there, they'll indicate a lot about, is this a business or is this a mission? And, my experience with going on down here with my son, it's a mission, and we're going to figure it out together. We're going to collaborate on it, as parents, as the student, and with the particular experts in those offices who have a real passion for creating access for students and families. And my advice there is, don't give up on the process. Understand that there are people that you don't even know yet that are as invested in your son or daughter getting an opportunity at their institution. They want them there. They want to we want our young people to go through this process, become more educated, more whole, and reach their full potential. And I think sometimes the perception is that, it's like banging your head against the wall and it's really impossible and it's not going to work. Of all the places I've been, I haven't seen that. I've seen the opposite. I've seen a lot of really passionate, incredible, dynamic people who can think outside the box and can help families figure it out.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I know, because you've got kids applying who maybe the first generation, and they even just get a hint of like, I don't know if they want me, or they're putting out this large dollar figure, and I'm not feeling that I'm connecting with this person. They're gonna sense it, and they're gonna go elsewhere quick. It's just a natural reaction. But to have somebody that, like you're saying, that you really feel like they're in there with them, and you're like, no, we want to help you, want to make this work, it goes a really long way. I think a lot of our kids who sense that are like, they love it. Like, it really buys them in, as opposed to kind of a negative vibe, and they're gone quick. And I don't blame them. And it depends on the school. It might depend on who you're talking to.
Sure.
From the school, how it goes.
Yep.
But and I think that back to your letter a little bit. Some of it was
Yep.
powerful pieces to it about the value of diversity. And I think sometimes it's hard to get it across to young people. They're like, well, I'm just, what does that mean? I'm going to go to college, and what is that? How does that help me? Or what does that benefit me? And I love the microcosm of your team when you talk about recruiting kids from like different countries who have never been with kids from other countries, just their own, bringing them together. It's almost like a microcosm of a whole university, but it's just on your team. And you talked about your own family in that letter. Talk a little bit about, if you were to kind of just the importance that you think of diversity.
Going through life and realizing that from a small town in upstate New York that was predominantly white, and then going to UVM, where I felt like that was a really missing component. As much as I love UVM and my experience and the relationships I was able to develop there, I thought that's a missing component. And it's something that I think the school needs to address. And I think they're working at it, but I think they can do more. And so my letter was, after having teams, and my best teams, in my opinion, and the best experiences that I had as a coach were teams that had all walks of life. We had kids from international backgrounds. We had all races. We had just about everything that you can think of in our team. And I felt like when that was created, there was an education that was going on that was not, it's sort of, I would say the education was not cut and dry. It was an education that was a constant process. So at a team meeting, prior to the meeting, we would have a meal. And a lot of the educating that was going on during the student athletes experience was during the meal. Just having a meal with a kid who's from a Jamaican Canadian background from Toronto, sitting across from a guy who's, Ghanaian American, sitting across from a guy who is from rural Vermont, and down here you've got kids from all over Florida, Miami area, which is different than the West Coast. And so in those conversations, all these topics come up, music, sport, religion, politics. And, my job was to really facilitate an openness and for everybody to say, hey, let's listen to this guy for a second. We were talking about the conflict in Korea and, getting a perspective from different parts of the world on how they felt about, different issues that were happening at that time. And the debates were fantastic, and sometimes I would get lost in some of these conversations and I'd forget. I'm like, hey, we got to do a film session. We got to play, University of South Florida tomorrow. We gotta know who we're up against. We would get so involved and ingrained in these conversations. But I felt like, again, the mission of the university, even athletics and sport teams, is to really develop the whole person. And I think when you have a diverse team and a diverse campus, it just has so much life. There's so much going on behind the scenes, and where you live and, your interaction, your daily interaction that doesn't necessarily involve a class. It doesn't necessarily involve a practice. It could be something like a bus trip. It could be, and you get some really incredible, important information in your growth that maybe you wouldn't have gotten just being at home. Maybe you wouldn't have gotten, I certainly wouldn't have gotten from just my hometown. I needed to go out and seek it and find it. And, and my wife, Amy, who's Black, and our biracial kids, I've learned a ton through, every day through our marriage and through our family, our life experience together, about her culture and her side of life. Her father, being from Alabama, from the deep South, and having some of, really getting to know him. And he's a very close mentor of mine, and obviously my father-in-law, and he's taught me as much as anybody on this planet, and, so, as you go through and have these experiences and you put yourself out there in the world, there's so much that can be taken out of it, and you can grow in so many different directions. And I think that's the responsibility of the university, is to spark that thought process. And if you don't feel like, or families don't feel like, I'm not going to get that there, you're probably not, and I think, but there are places where you can, and you just got to do your homework to figure out where those places are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the mentorship piece too, it's one of our 3 core practices. And to hear about your father-in-law, I think sometimes kids think, well, you just have a mentor when you're 15, 16, and you have them your whole life, right?
Yeah.
And just continue, and you do. And I think colleges are really, Jeff Martin, our previous webinar with him, talked about having what he calls encouragers, people who are kind of on your team. So they're mentors, they're older than you, but they kind of encourage you to follow your passion. And see, I feel like college is a place where it's like, okay, you have 4 years to develop these relationships. But a lot of them are mentors that lead you, for the rest of your life in many ways. Seems like, and especially in athletics, I think it's a place where there's a lot of mentors around you in the athletic department. And I think sometimes kids, and I don't know if you have any advice here, but they struggle sometimes. They're shy perhaps a little bit. And it's like, and if they're not on a team, which most people aren't, right? How do they seek out a mentor? They're afraid to ask. A lot of our kids are afraid to sort of ask, hey, can you help me? They're worried about hearing no. Is there any sort of advice you'd have there?
Well, when I look at a mentor, there's a reason. When you respect somebody, there's a reason why you respect them. And to me, those reasons usually lead me in that direction. Why do I respect my father-in-law? The head of the Multicultural Center at UVM was a great mentor for me. She was just, when I needed advice, when, I'm not going to say after a loss, but I'm a sore loser. So that never helped. When I needed somebody, to sort of say, hey, wait a minute, keep your feet in the ground, stay humble, understand this is part of the process. If you're having a tough day, and I was very fortunate to be able to have people like that. And I sought those people out. And eventually one of my mentors, it was interesting. She said to me, why are you always seeking out information? Why are you always seeking out mentoring? My answer was, I always, I want to be the best I can be. I want to become the best leader I can be. And I want to, be able to get as much information in my philosophy in my own personal life to become, the best person I can become. And she said to me, she said, I understand that and I get that, but you do it so often that sometimes you've just got to listen to your own voice too. Like you can lose if you're being over mentored, and I'm not, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying don't seek them out, but sometimes the best mentoring can come from within, and this is the right decision for me. Now I'm going to talk to my leaders and say, hey, if this was you, what would you do? And how do you feel about my decision in terms of this or that? And you'll get some, if you surround yourself with the right people, you'll get some very good information. But ultimately, she explained to me, like, and it was like a light bulb moment. It's like, you need to trust yourself too, and so I think when you have a certain, you can develop that. I was a shy guy in high school. People would tell you that I was an introvert. I am an introvert. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking in my own mind, and I would hold off saying something before, really thinking it through before I'd say anything. Even at UVM, I was never recognized probably until my senior year as a leader. And I was observing and learning. And I think I can totally relate to that type of personality. But in the end, I think, I was fortunate to be able to find people that, in and around my academic experience and my athletic experience that I really respected, and became courageous enough to ask them. And they were, generous enough to share with me. And ultimately, eventually, I was able to kind of develop my own personal theory and philosophy, and then start to trust it. And so my advice there is seek out information, but, from the right people that you really respect and trust. But eventually, you also want to be able to build your own inner voice that you can start to build some faith in too.
That's a great view of it. We often we so are like, get a mentor, but you're right. You can get over mentored, but to trust yourself when you're younger, that can be a hard thing sometimes. You're like, hey, that's an adult. They told me to do this. I should do it. And we all can name times in our lives where we listened to an adult and it wasn't a great move, whereas, we probably should have. But I think you're right. If you seek out a variety of individuals and you get varying feedback and information, then you trust yourself with all that information to make a decision. That's a great, because I think kids do defer often to adults. A few more minutes left. Anything else you want to address? We're looking really forward to working with you and connecting. You mentioned some soccer players we can get in the mix with CFES, and some pro players and as mentors in other areas. But anything else you want to talk about that we didn't address?
Yeah, I would think that I have a meeting tonight where I'm part of a leadership academy in our athletic department, where we have some of our top student athletes who have applied and been accepted into this leadership program. And I think leadership is really something that's important to discuss. It's a topic that I think is a bit of a moving target. And, you know, I think when the high school students start to move in a direction towards their goals, I think what I've seen as a parent and as a coach, especially in their younger years, it's very much about them. And ultimately, that decision is. But I think as they start to progress and go through the experience and they become upperclassmen, and they, even certain family members, older brothers, older sisters, you're sort of thrust in a leadership role. And to me, I think defining that and going through the process of, you know, thinking that through is really critical, because eventually it's how you impact others and, you know, how you influence others. And I think, you know, one of the ultimate goals for me in my program with our guys is that when they graduate here, they're leaders and they're ready to really impact their communities. Whether they go on to be professional soccer players, their pro teams, you know, in their careers in terms of organizations, corporations, and really be people that kind of at some point transition from just thinking about their own sort of journey and start to think about how they can impact other people and their journeys. So I just wanted to touch on that, because I think that's becoming a really big point of emphasis. Wasn't as much in my time. It was something that was more it happened more naturally and organically. I think I don't want to say when you and I went to school, because I think, you know, I think you're younger than me, but
Yeah.
Or you certainly look younger.
No.
But you know, I think that's really become a point of emphasis where we're really trying to get that leadership component weaved into the university experience. And I think, again, being down here at FGCU, there's a community outreach expectation, you know, that we are impacting our community in a positive way. There's an expectation around a certain amount of hours that you're spending in the community. So things are definitely shifting in that direction, and I think it's a really good thing to discuss. And I don't know, you know, I think it's part of the CFES mission, and I think that piece is vitally important. And I think it's something that if kids in high school can start to get a sort of a handle on that, and understanding of, and a theory and a philosophy on what that means, man, they have a huge advantage going into this experience.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a CFES, one of our essential skills. And I think, to your point, we could do a whole nother show on it. I mean, it's a lot of kids. I never thought of myself as a leader. Kids don't think I'm a leader. Like, what? I'm 15. I'm not a leader. You know what I mean? But there's things they can do. If they're in the community and they're out there helping, they're leading. That's leadership. But they don't think of it that way. So to kind of build that leadership belief, and like you said, you didn't even feel like a leader on your own soccer team until you were, you know, what, senior year, junior year. It's just to instill it in them, but to define it too, I think, like to your point. What does that mean? I mean, there's hundreds of books on it. You know, the definition varies greatly. And I think that you're right, to define it and then work with students to cultivate it is huge. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on and discussing all these issues. Would love to talk again, have you involved in a lot of other CFES stuff moving forward. So keep up.
Would love to. I've enjoyed it, and I just appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity, and I'd love to meet, you know, people who are involved in the program down the road for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, good luck. We'll talk to you again.
All right. Thanks, John.
All right. Take care.
Take care.